Welcome back to Around the Table with Stacy Smith as we take a look at the economy and investing. The United States and most of the rest of the world has been dealing with inflation, trying to bring it under control. That, though, is not the case in China, where they are now looking at the possibility of deflation and an economy that is weakening. So, Carrie, should what happens to China have any concern to American investors?
Well, given that China's economy is large, we must pay attention to it. And as with most things in economics, one of the reasons why it's very hard to figure out, and there are a million jokes about economists, and there's the good thing and a bad thing with every economic data point that comes out. So in this case, deflation in China can help inflation around the world because prices on things that we purchase from China can come down. But the flip side to it is that it is a large economy. And if we start to see the implications of deflation that may lead to a recession, because when you get into deflation, people tend to put off purchases because they feel that they may see further price declines. And a recession in China can have implications on the rest of the world. But I actually think in this circumstance, you have to look at the context. And coming out of COVID, we had experienced such a surge. China had experienced such a surge in exports in particular. And now what we're seeing is, when you look at the data in a vacuum, you're seeing a decline off of those numbers. So the big question is this really systemic deflation, or is this just a result of the numbers and getting back to a sustainable level of prices?
China, I think, is as Carrie is saying, I tend to agree with her. China is the second largest economy in the world, and if it's not doing well, that is somewhat of a problem. Part of the reason it isn't doing well is because of the vitriol between us and them. That a lot of their economy depended on us buying much of their stuff. I haven't seen any numbers lately as to how that's going. Months ago, we were buying a lot from them. I don't know if that's still true or not. And the nationalization, this national movement that's going on, where every country's trying to get it within themselves, and the deterioration of globalization that is, I think, is making China suffer, because they're pretty much an exporting nation. The Chinese have been trying to get their people to be consumers, but I think culturally that is not something that's going to change rapidly, if at all. Unlike us, where we're consumers, and that's I mean, just drive down the roads. Gasoline prices went up. I see media reports of how everybody's complaining about gasoline prices and how they can't do anything, in food prices, and yet you still need a reservation to get into a restaurant, and the roads are jammed. They're always jammed. There's traffic everywhere. So we talk a lot, but I don't think we care.
So here's a fun fact. Although we think we are like a really big influence on China, their closest trading partner, where a lot of their product ends up, is Europe. And Europe is having problems, some self-inflicted through their energy pricing schemes, and just kind of moribund growth. I mean, everybody's always looked to Europe and said, oh, that place is going to take off, and it never quite does. And it's because of a lot of reasons. But right now, a lot of Europe is in recession. So it's not terribly surprising that China is reflecting deflationary pricing, because, we're buying less, and certainly Europe is buying less. And, it's tough that the people who run China, the Communist Party, thinks that they can control the economy. And I think it's escaped them. I think it's too big now, too complicated, but we'll see.
I think Carrie hit the nail on the head on a lot of those things. I think this is somewhat of a renormalization of what we've seen over the past couple of years, because if you look at China's inflation indices, they were up I think even more so than the US is after 2020, just given how much stuff Western countries bought during COVID. It was talk, but outright deflation is something that no government really wants. I mean, China is very close in proximity to Japan, and Japan went through 2 decades of a deflationary spiral, and I know China certainly doesn't want to succumb to that. The Chinese leadership, and I agree with you, Kim, it's the Chinese economy has gotten so big that it's hard for them to control things, but make no mistake, they are still incredibly obsessed with growth and hitting their growth targets. I don't think they'll do anything necessary to hit those targets because I don't think they want to add too much more debt to their balance sheets, but they still have some tools at their disposal to help push inflation a little bit higher. So I don't think they're going to spiral into like a deflationary outcome that we saw in Japan starting in the 80s.
All right, we have to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment.